Okay. Good afternoon once again.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
How's the mid-semester exam like? How was it?
So it wasn't
Sir,
easy.
it was
It's simple.
It wasn't easy.
It was the time. The time.
I couldn't finish, and the question went off.
So it wasn't easy. Time
Hello. Let's do it one at a time. One at a time, please. If you want to say something, raise up your hand. I'll give you that. Okay. So Albert Krampasaki.
Sir, please say the time was not enough. Also, the questions were hard. Very, very, very hard for me. For me, my questions, yes, for my questions, and the time too. I don't know of the others, but for me, the time and the questions, it was not easy. Thank you.
Albert, this simple question you are telling me they are difficult.
Yes, it was difficult too. Or maybe the timing. I don't know. Maybe the timing was not at all. The time was too small for us.
Because honestly speaking, I gave you 30 minutes for 40 questions. And before I even gave the 30 minutes, I did preview or pre-testing. I did the test myself. And I could spend like 12 minutes to answer all the 40 questions in 12 minutes.
Sir, it's because it's your
course, why you are Mr. DWOMOH. That's why you are Mr. DWOMOH.
It's because you know everything.
That's why you are Mr. DWOMOH.
Sir, it's because you are the boss of the course.
Student too.
Can you set the questions?
Some of us, our questions were difficult and the time too wasn't this thing. The time was limited.
So it's as if for me, like all the complicated questions locate me. It wasn't easy. All the complicated questions that you have in there, they locate me.
Some of us we didn't finish and the thing submitted it by itself.
Sir, it was okay.
Sir, it was standard. With all the midterm we've written, yours was standard.
Mine was standard, right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Professors, we beg, we just follow the steps.
Questions were more than standard. They were more than standard.
Veronica.
So I could use
okay, it's okay. Veronica,
Sir, please, can you hear me?
Listen to only Vero. Vero, what's your problem?
Sir, please, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sir, please, my question was very difficult and the time too. I couldn't finish and the thing submitted by itself. The time. Sir, please, next time do something for us. The time.
Like I said before, I even allowed you to do it. I did a pre-exam myself and I used 12 minutes to answer all the 40 questions.
Yes, sir, you see, sir, you've been teaching by some of us, you see, from the wall to classroom again.
Anyway, that's just by the way. Let's Lillian, Adoliba, and Zakio, I think you are all going to say the same thing. So let's finish with today's lecture. When we are done, then we will come back to the midterm, okay? Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. All right, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Now, I think the last time we met, we discussed about
the
last time we met, we discussed about the.
Where are
you? Please mute yourself. Mute yourself. Mute yourself now. Mute yourself so that we can have a very good lecture. So the last time we met, we discussed about the skeletal system, and I'm sure we've done both the axial and then the appendicular skeleton. We said that the axial skeleton is made up of the skull, the sternum, the vertebral column, and the ribs. And then the appendicular skeleton is made up of the shoulder girdle and the bones of the upper limb, and then the pelvic girdle, and then the bones of the lower limb. So basically that is all about the skeletal system. Today, we want to talk about the muscular system. The muscular system. We want to talk about the muscular system today. Muscular system. Now, as far as the muscular system is concerned, there are over 650 named muscles in the human body. There are over 650 named muscles. When we're talking about the skeletal system, we said that there are 206 bones that form the human body. Now, before we even go deep to talk about the muscular system, I want us to quickly refresh our mind on what we did under the muscle tissue when we're talking about the types of tissue. And then under the muscle tissue, we discussed that there are three main types of muscle tissue. We have the cardiac muscle tissue that is found only in the heart. We have the skeletal muscle tissue that is attached to the bones of the skeleton. And then we have the smooth muscle tissue that is found in the wall of the viscera. So technically, when we talk about muscular system, the focus is on the skeletal system. The focus is mainly on the skeletal system because the cardiac muscle specifically is found in the heart. The smooth muscles are found in the wall of the viscera. But when we talk about muscular system, then the focus will be on the skeletal system. And I've already emphasized that there are over 650 named muscles that are found in the body. And when we talk about these muscles, the emphasis is mainly on the skeletal muscles, So the muscular system is an organ system consisting of skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscles, but like I've already emphasized, the focus is on the skeletal muscles, It allows movement, maintains posture, and helps in the circulation of blood throughout the body. So how does the skeletal muscles help in blood flow? By contraction of these muscles, within the muscle, there are blood vessels. So as the muscles contract, it helps in the flow of blood throughout the body. So together with the skeletal system, the skeletal muscles plus all the skeletal system or the bones of the skeleton, they form what we call the musculoskeletal system. So the skeletal muscles in the body plus the bones of the body, they form what we call the musculoskeletal system. So like I've already indicated, there are over 650 muscles in the human body. And these muscles or the skeletal muscles are elastic tissues. And the muscles are made up of smaller units known as muscle fibers. And there are over tens or thousands of muscle fibers in the body. And each muscle fiber is made up of smaller units known as myofibrils. So muscle cells are specialized contractor cells called fibers. Like I've already indicated, the functions are for balance, posture, movement, flow of blood, and they also help in the generation of heat for the body. So like we discussed under muscle tissue, there are three main types of muscle tissue. This is the cardiac muscle tissue that is found in the heart. Under the cardiac muscle, when we were discussing cardiac muscle, we said that they have short branching cells called cardiac myocytes, and it is either uninucleated or binucleated, meaning that the cardiac myocyte have either one nucleus or two nuclei. And then we said that the cardiac myocytes, they are also marked by end-to-end by what we call the intercalated disc that help in the smooth transfer of electrical conduction throughout the whole cardiac muscles. And then we also mentioned about the smooth muscle that is found in the wall of the viscera. That has only one nucleus. It is uninucleated. It has no striations, but the cardiac muscle have cross branches, striations. But smooth muscles do not have any striations. And it has only one nucleus that is centrally placed in the middle of the spindle-shaped cell. And then the skeletal muscles are multinucleated, made up of long cylindrical cells that have a lot of nuclei, and their nuclei are mostly found at the periphery of the skeletal muscle tissue. So smooth muscles found in the wall of a viscera. We know a viscera is any organ in the cavity. So the organs in the abdominal cavity are all viscera. So the liver, the spleen, the stomach, the intestines, they are all viscera. So the muscles that are found in the viscera are called smooth muscles. Muscles that are found in the heart are called cardiac muscles. And when we talk about muscular system, the focus is on the muscles that are attached to the bones of the skeleton. That is the skeletal muscles, which are mainly under voluntary control. So now let's talk about the organization of a skeletal muscle. Since we are saying that muscular system, the focus is on the skeletal muscles, and we've already indicated that there are over 650 named skeletal muscles in the body. Now let's focus on the organization of a skeletal muscle. The organization of a skeletal muscle. Now let's all say organization of a skeletal muscle. Let's say it together.
Organization of the skeletal muscles.
Organization of the skeletal muscle. Organization of the skeletal muscle.
Very good, very good. That's good. Skeletal muscle. Good, good. I just wanted to know whether you are following. So now a skeletal muscle contains hundreds of thousands of muscle fibers with blood vessels and nerves passing through them. So throughout the whole muscle, providing internal structure and scaffolding, there's an extensive network of connective tissue that is found throughout the whole skeletal muscle tissue. Now, the entire skeletal muscle is surrounded by a connective tissue sheet known as epimysium. Epimysium. So the outermost covering of a skeletal muscle is known as epimysium. Epimysium. Now, within the skeletal muscle cells, remember I said that the skeletal muscle cells are made up of long cylindrical cells. They are collected into separate bundles called fascicles. Fascicles. So if you go back, this is the whole skeletal muscle, and these are the long cylindrical cells that form the fascicles. Now, around the whole skeletal muscle tissue, it is being surrounded by a dense irregular connective tissue called epimysium. Epimysium. And then this whole skeletal muscle tissue have long cylindrical cells that are collected into a bundle, and this bundle is called a fascicle. A fascicle. So long cylindrical cells collected in a bundle, and each bundle is called a fascicle. Now, the fascicles are also joined end to end. So that is the skeletal muscle tissue. The outermost covering is made up of a connective tissue known as the epimysium that is made up of dense irregular connective tissue. And then this epimysium has a collection of fascicles. So this is one fascicle, another fascicle, a third fascicle, and then this fascicle has been pulled out. So this is a fascicle. And then binding the fascicles together is also another connective tissue that joins the fascicles together. So the outer wall layer of the fascicles are being joined end to end by another connective tissue called perimysium. Perimysium. So we have epimysium covering, joining the whole fascicles together to form the skeletal muscle tissue. And then we have perimysium that joins one fascicle to the other. Perimysium. So this is called a perimysium, joining one skeletal muscle fascicle to the other. And then within a fascicle, there are smaller units called myofibers. So if this is a whole fascicle, the smaller units. So let's count the number of myofibers in this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So there are 11 myofibers in this fascicle. So this single myofiber has been pulled out. So a fascicle is made up of smaller myofibers put together. This is like a broom having individual broomsticks. So a fascicle is a broom, and each of the broomsticks is called a myofiber. Now, joining the myofibers together is also another connective tissue known as endomysium. So endomysium joins the myofibers together, Perimysium joins the fascicles together, and then epimysium covers the whole skeletal muscle tissue together. So take note of that. Epimysium covers the whole skeletal muscle tissue together. Perimysium joins the fascicles together, and then endomysium joins the myofiber. That is the connective tissue that joins the myofibers together. Now, when you pull one myofiber out, the myofiber is also made up of smaller units called myofibrils. Myofibrils. So a myofiber is made up of smaller units called myofibrils. These myofibrils have a sarcolemma that forms plasma, the fluid medium or the connective tissue that join the myofibrils together, or the sarcoplasma. So that is how a skeletal muscle tissue is organized. Now, each of these connectors we are talking about, they run the entire length of the skeletal muscle tissue. And then at the end of so this connective tissue, the epimysium, perimysium, endomysium, plasma, they run the whole length of the muscle tissue. And then the ends of the skeletal muscle, where the muscle is to be attached to a bone, the tissues together form what we call a tendon. They merge together to form what we call a tendon. And the tendon helps to bind the skeletal muscle to the bone. Remember, when we're talking about connective tissue, we said that tendon is one of the connective a muscle to a bone. Good. So we said they bind the fiber into a nice structure, and they blend together at the end of the muscle to form what we call a tendon. And the tendon helps to join the muscle to it. Now, tendons are rope-like. At times, tendons can form a broad sheet. Tendons can form a broad sheet, and when tendons form a broad sheet, it is called aponeurosis. When tendons form a broad sheet, it is known as aponeurosis. For example, aponeurosis that is found between the occipitalis and frontalis muscle. This is the frontalis found frontal bone, and the osis is found on the occipital bone. So broad sheet that joins the frontalis occipitalis, and this broad is called an aponeurosis. Aponeurosis. Now the flesh of a muscle is, let's take note of that. The skeleton of a muscle belly. Good. Contraction of a muscle occurs because of later contraction of the inner muscle fiber. That is the myofiber. So individual contraction of the myofiber also results in overall contraction of the whole skeletal tissue. Under the skeletal muscles are seen as long, for highlighted that one, and this long skeletal muscle, they run parallel to each other. Parallel to each other. They have banded eyes that have alternating light and dark. So these are the myofibrils made up of long cylindricals, the myofibrils. Remember, we said that the myofibrils come to muscle fiber, and the fiber, myofibers form what we call fascicles. So this is a muscle fiber made of fibrils. And then the myofibrils have a sarcolemma at the uppermost covering. And then the sarcoplasma, the connective that joins the myofibrils together. Now the whole skeletal muscle fiber is very long. Yeah, about 10 centimeters, the longest muscle. Each of them have nuclei. Several nuclei in the skeletal muscle tissue, multinuclei. And like I've already highlighted, the cytoplasm of the muscle cell, also known as the cytoplasm, and they contain the contractile element that helps in contraction of the whole skeleton. Again, a lot of mitochondria in muscle tissue. We know that the main function of is to allow for of energy to the mitochondria. So as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of mitochondria are found in the skeletal tissue, and this mitochondria, they've been generating heat of energy. They help in the generation of energy of the skeletal tissue. Also present is a slight oxygen substance called myoglobin, and they help in.
Please, sir, the slide.
Yes, 200. That is a problem.
Please, your slides are.
Yeah, your slide is
not changing.
And the voice is breaking.
Is it changing now? Is it changing now?
Yes, yes, sir.
It does not change.
Hello?
Yes, sir, it's changing now.
Yes, sir. Just keep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So I was highlighting that present muscle tissue. So a specialized myoglobin, similar to the hemoglobin of blood cells, and the storage of oxygen within the skeletal muscle tissue. So there's myoglobin in the skeletal muscles that help in the of oxygen. Also extensive source of calcium that helps in contraction. Now, within the skeletal muscle tissue, there is what we call actin myosin and myosin filaments. There are two contractile filaments within the fibers: thick filament and thin filament. Thin filament and filament are in repeating units known as the sarcomere. Now, thick filaments are made up of the protein myosin. So myosin are thick filaments, and they correspond to the dark band seen under the microscope. And thin filaments are also made up of the protein actin. So, yes.
Because the slides was not changing, it looks like where you are the slides you are teaching us is not the slide that has been projected to us.
Which has been projected now?
What?
Skeletal muscle fibers.
Skeletal muscle fibers.
No, what has been projected to us is about contraction of the skeletal muscles, but not the.
Contraction the skeletal muscles. Slide number was
slide 12. Slide 12.
Numbered. Which number?
Slide 12.
12.
Yes.
Yes, slide 12.
Wow.
8-12.
And because of that, we are not following what we are teaching.
Are you there? On slide 7?
8-12.
From slide 10, we couldn't get anything.
I 7 now.
So it has now changed to 13.
Even if master could have gone today.
You should start all the way from slide 10.
It's supposed to be more than that. Where he was talking about the apoptosis muscle, what, all those places we don't see it.
Yeah, aponeurosis was there.
Please, can you see the slide now?
Yes, please.
Yes, which slide do we have now? Slide number.
It's actin and myosin.
17.
And the sarcomeres.
17.
17, good. Good. So we can continue from there. So I was saying that within the skeletal muscle tissue, there are two types of contractile myofilaments. We have thick filament made up of the protein myosin and thin filament made up of the protein actin. So we have thick filament made up of the protein myosin. So under the microscope, you will see the thick filaments as dark bands. So they are alternating light and dark bands. The dark bands are made up of the protein myosin, and they are also known as the thick filaments. The thin filaments are made up of the protein actin, and these are seen as light bands. They are seen as the light bands. Good. So in slide number 18, I hope you've seen it. Are we on slide 18 now?
Nope. Yes.
Yes.
Good. Well, so in slide 18, these are the thin filaments made up of the protein actin, and then the thick filament made up of the protein myosin. Now, the ends of where the alternating light and dark bands they meet, their ends are known as sarcomeres. So a sarcomere has alternating light and dark bands. And the ends of the sarcomere are marked by what we call the Z line or the Z disc. So from this end, the Z line to another Z line is known as a sarcomere. So a skeletal muscle cell has lots of sarcomeres that has alternating light and dark bands. And the sarcomeres are joined end to end by what we call a Z disc or a Z line. Now we have the thin filament or the actin joining the ends of the sarcomere, that is the Z disc. So that is the actin filament. They come all the way to join the ends of the Z disc. So we have the actin filaments. So in this diagram, they are the purple, the actin filament. And the middle of the sarcomere is known as the M line, the M line. And then we also have the dark bands or the myosin filaments also projecting from the M line. And the myosin filament projects from the M line such that they cross or they interlace or they cross at a point. They cross the actin filament, but they do not come into direct contact with each other. Now, the key thing that we need to learn here is that when the myosin filament projects in between the actin filament, during contraction, when the myosin filament pull more into the actin filament, that is a gap in between the actin filament, where the myosin filament pull more or is drawn more into it, what happens is that it results into shortening of the sarcomere. The whole sarcomere shortens because the Z lines are going to get closer. They are going to move closer to each other because the myosin is pulling in between the actin filaments. So when the myosin draws more in between the actin filaments, then it results into what we call shortening of the whole sarcomere because the Z lines move closer to each other. And this interaction will finally result into what we call contraction of the skeletal muscle cell. Good. So we're saying that the actin filaments are light bands, and then the myosin filaments are the dark bands. And then running in the middle is the M line, where the myosin filament projects from each side. I think I've said all this already. Now, we have what we call a neuromuscular junction. A neuromuscular junction. In the skeletal muscle tissue, there are nerve cells that allows in the transmission of impulses, or that helps in the contraction of the skeletal muscle tissue. So skeletal muscle cells contract in response to stimulation from a motor nerve fiber. So we have a skeletal muscle cell that comes into close proximity with what we call the nerve fiber. So there's a synapse between the two of them. So when it is very close to the muscle cell, nerve fiber splits into a sheet of very fine filaments. They only come into close proximity, but they do not touch each other. And that area is called the motor end plate. So that is the motor neuron. These are the skeletal muscle cells. So we have the motor neurons and then the skeletal muscle cells. So here, the skeletal muscle cells and then the motor neuron, they come into close proximity, but they do not touch each other. And the gap that is left in between the motor neuron or the nerve cells and the skeletal muscle cell, that gap is called the synapse. The synapse. And that is known as the neuromuscular junction. The neuromuscular junction. So each filament forms a synapse with a nerve and a nerve cell and a muscle cell. And at the neuromuscular junction, the main neurotransmitter that is released there is acetylcholine or acetylcholine. And this stimulates contraction at the neuromuscular junction. So when there's a release of acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction, it generates what we call action potential. Action potential is generated and is spreads along the whole muscle cell membrane. So in order to activate the contractile machinery inside the muscle cell, action potential is also conducted throughout the whole interior through a specialized network of channels that runs through the sarcoplasm. You know, the sarcoplasm is the connective tissue that joins the myofibrils together. This releases calcium from the intracellular stores within the skeletal muscle tissue, and it causes the actin and myosin filament to bind or cross over or cross bridge each other. Remember, I said that the middle of the sarcomere is the M line, and the ends of the sarcomere is the Z line. Now, projecting from the M line are the thick filaments or the myosin. And then at the ends of the Z line are release of calcium from the intracellular stores of the whole muscle fiber. Then it will result into pulling of the myosin filament more closer to the actin. And as a result of that, there's cross-bridging of the actin and myosin filament, shortening the whole sarcomere. And this will result into contraction. It will result into contraction of the skeletal muscle cell. Remember, energy is needed. So ATP is released from a lot of mitochondria that are found to provide energy so that the actin and myosin filaments will slide over each other, pulling the Z lines at each end of the sarcomere, which will result into shortening of the whole skeletal muscle cell. And this whole theory is called the sliding filament theory. Sliding filament theory. So this is what we are talking about in slide 26. These are the thick filaments or the myosin filaments. And then these are the thin filaments or the actin filaments. So we have the Z line that forms the end of the sarcomere, the M or the A zone that forms the middle of the sarcomere. So projecting from the sarcomere are the myosin filaments. Projecting from the Z line are the actin. Realize that at this point where I'm circling, they cross each other, but the crossing is not deep. But when there is release of acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction, that causes the release of more calcium. It causes the myosin filament to pull more inwards. So it helps to cross the myosin filament to pull more inwards, such that the myosin will cross bridge with the actin. If you look at the degree of pull here, as compared to how the myosin filaments have pulled more inward, this one is more larger than that of when it is in a resting state. So as a result of that, the myosin filament pull more inwards, and then this will result into shortening of the This will result into shortening. It will result into shortening of the whole sarcomere. And by this process, we say that there's contraction of the skeletal muscle. Contraction of the skeletal muscle has occurred. So during contraction of the skeletal muscle, the muscle will only relax when there's the stimulation of the nerve stops. So when there is no stimulation of the muscle fiber, then the muscle will relax, and then when it relaxes, it resumes back into the original position. So what will happen is that the whole sarcomere will pull back again. So from this state, the sarcomere will pull back again, and then the actin filament, the cross-bridging, will be relaxed, and that will result into the relaxation of the skeletal muscle fiber. So the muscle fiber returns to its original state. Now, where the motor neuron comes into close proximity with the skeletal muscle tissues, that junction is a neuromuscular junction, but the points on the skeletal muscle cells are known as the motor end plates or the motor units. The motor end plates or the motor unit. That is not the center of discussion for our lecture, but when you get a slide, I will encourage you to read more on the motor end units. Now, what is the action of skeletal muscle? Now, when individual muscle cells in a muscle shorten, they pull on the whole connective tissue framework, running the whole length of the muscle, and this develops a degree of tension or tone. Remember, we said that the epimysium, the perimysium, endomysium, they run the whole length of the skeletal muscle cell. So when the whole cell shortens, the connective tissues also is pulled, and this develops a degree of tension. And this is known as the muscle tone. So when a skeletal muscle fiber contracts, it obeys what we call the all or none principle. And all or none principle means that whether the whole fiber contracts completely or it doesn't contract at all. Now, the degree of contraction is achieved by the whole muscle and depend on the number of fibers within it that are contracting and how often they are being stimulated. Now, this means that in order to increase the length of a muscle contraction, motor units must be activated. Yes, we understand this, that without the motor neurons stimulating the muscle cell. Yeah, please, the one, mute yourself. Kindly mute yourself for me. James, I say, mute yourself. Yeah, so we're saying that in order to increase the strength of the muscle contraction, more motor units must be stimulated or activated so that you'll be able to lift a heavy weight. So to lift a heavy weight, you need more active muscle fibers to do that than you are lifting a lighter weight. So muscle tone is a sustained partial muscle contraction that allows maintenance of posture without fatigue to the muscles. Good. So group of muscle fibers within this muscle take its intent to contract so that at any one time, some fibers are contracted and others will be relaxing. And this allows the effort required to hold the head upright to be distributed throughout the whole muscle. So we say that we need good muscle tone to protect the joints and give firmness and shape. Rose, what's your question?
Sir, please, can you go over the muscle tone for me again?
We're saying that muscle tone, when skeletal muscles contract, it obeys the all or none principle, right? And the degree of contraction also depends on the number of fibers that have been stimulated by the motor neuron or the nerves, because the skeletal muscles cannot contract when they don't have stimulation from the nerve fibers. So when the nerve fibers stimulate the skeletal muscle cells, there is a sustained contraction. There's a sustained muscle contraction throughout the whole muscle fiber. And that is all about the muscle tone. That is all about the muscle tone. So you said that you need a good muscle tone to give firmness and shape, even when the muscles are relaxed. Now, to work at sustained levels, muscles need adequate supply of oxygen and fuel, that is glucose. So you need both oxygen and glucose to be able to have a strong or good muscle tone to be able to hold an object or to be able to use the muscles for a particular work. So when do we say muscles have undergone fatigue? When do we say there's fatigue of the muscles? There's only fatigue of the muscle when you are not supplying your muscles with both adequate supply of oxygen and glucose. And so when you are not eating, let's say you are fasting, or you decided to go on a hunger strike, and so there are less glucose levels in your blood. So once there's less glucose level in your blood, that will mean that your muscle wouldn't get the enough fuel to be able to undergo its contraction. And that will result into what we call muscle fatigue, or what nurses we normally describe as easy fatigability. So fatigue occurs when a muscle works at a level that exceeds the supply of both oxygen and glucose. So under fasting or starvation, moments of starvation or fasting, you realize that there are less glucose stores, so there's less fuel for the muscles, and the muscles will undergo what we call fatigue. So to correct the fatigue, all we need to do is to take in more glucose to correct the fatigue, provide more energy for fatigue. So this is all talking about all fatigue. So after exercise, muscles need a period of time to recover, to replenish its ATP, that is energy, and glycogen stores, and to help in repair of damaged fibers. So for some period after exercise, we need to take in more glucose. That's why some people after going to the gym, they take in more glucose. These are fuel that will be given to the muscles to be able to recover from the fatigue. So what are the factors that affect skeletal muscle performance? Skeletal muscles perform better when it is regularly exercised. Yes, which is true. The more you exercise the skeletal muscle, the more it performs better. So we're saying that exercise and training will provide endurance and power to the muscles. In order for the muscle not to undergo constant fatigue, it needs lots of training and exercise. So anaerobic training, such as weightlifting, increases the muscle bulk, and that is known as hypertrophy of the muscle. So those who normally go to the gym, the more they do a lot of weightlifting, there's increase in the skeletal muscle fibers, and that is called hypertrophy of the muscles. So the more you exercise the muscles, the probability that the muscles will become bigger are high, and that is known as hypertrophy of the muscle. But we should also know, and I believe that as nurses, we know that as we age, it helps to reduce the size of the fibers. The skeletal muscle fibers reduce due to aging, probably because of weakening of the muscle cells. And then the endurance and the strength of the muscles also weakens with age. Good. So now let's talk about isometric and isotonic contraction before we move on to talk about the various types of skeletal muscle cells in the body. Isometric and isotonic contraction. Now we're saying that contraction of a muscle usually results into shortening. So the biceps muscle, the muscle found on the anterior part of the upper arm. So for instance, the bicep muscle of the forearm is used to pick, let's say, a cup. So you pick a cup. Now the power generated by this muscle is used to lift the manageable weights. However, the tension in the muscle remains constant. In this situation, the contraction is described as isotonic contraction. Iso means same, tonic means tension. Let me go over the isotonic contraction again. So we're saying that anytime there's contraction of the skeletal muscle, it results into shortening because we know that the actin and mycin filament, they cross bridge over each other to result in the shortening of the muscle. So when we pick a cup, let's assume that I've picked a cup. That is a manageable weight. It is not heavier. Now, I'm saying that once you pick the manageable weight, the tension in the muscle remain constant because you will not feel any excessive contraction. So it's because it's a manageable weight. The tension in the bicep muscle remains constant. So you can even hold it for quite a longer period of time without even feeling any stress in your muscle. And because the tension remains constant, it is the same tension, the same muscle tone transferred in the biceps. So that is called isotonic contraction. Same tension, same tone. However, if you are using the same muscles to lift, let's say, a heavier object, or let's say an 80-kilogram man with just one hand, you struggle in doing that. But the muscles of the arm and the shoulder will still be working hard to make an attempt to carry that heavy load. So in this situation, because the resistance from the weight is too great for the muscles of the biceps, now the muscles will not be able to shorten, but the power generated increases and the muscle tension. So we have here, we have the same length. Isometric contraction is about the same length. Let me go over the isometric group. We say that when you are using your hand to lift a heavy object, you'll be able to, you are unable to do that because this is not a manageable weight. The weight is very heavy for you. It is not manageable. So you realize that the muscles of the shoulders and the neck will even help you to attempt to hold the heavier object. So because the resistance from the weight is too great for you to move the object, the muscles will be unable to shorten. But the power generated increases. And because the muscles are unable to shorten, the length of the muscle remains the same. And that type of contraction is called isometric. So isometric is same length, but the muscles are unable to shorten. So same length, isometric contraction. And then isotonic, same tone. The muscles shorten in isotonic, but the same tension is maintained. Same tone is maintained throughout the contraction. So that is isotonic. By isometric, the muscles are unable to shorten because the weight is stronger for you to carry. So muscles cannot shorten. And that is called isometric contraction. Now let's learn some brief muscle terminology before we talk about all the skeletal muscles of the body. Now for every skeletal muscle in the body, there is what we call origin and then insertion. We need to know these two key things, two key terminologies: origin of a muscle and then insertion of them. Because all the skeletal muscles, all the over 650 skeletal muscles in the body, they have origin and they have an insertion. Now, before the origin